Welcome everybody to the Transparency in Fashion Industry panel event today, hosted by BLab Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country and pay my respects to the Wurundjeri peoples, the elders past, present and emerging. And in particular, pay respects to anyone who may be joining us from Indigenous heritage and the First Peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand also. You're looking here at the Wurundjeri people's seasonal calendar, which is informed by changes in our landscape and connection between sea and sky and lands. And right now, many of you may be feeling it. We're moving into the Waring Wombat season, so cooler days, misty moments, less sunlight, and the wombats begin to emerge from their burrows to bask in the sunshine. And I live close to a creek. I actually live close to the Moonee Ponds Creek in Wurundjeri lands here. And I'm very excited this morning on my walk to see that the local community and the local government has come together to reinstate the original waterways, which have been a traditional life source for Indigenous cultures for ancient times. And they're removing concrete, which has been installed in there. It's been 50 years in the making and a sign of community coming together to achieve change and respect Indigenous cultures and the ancient history. Which is something we can all feel inspiration from as we come together to look at during Fashion Revolution Week and how community can drive change. And in particular, I'd like to pay respects to the Indigenous ancient art and culture of weaving. As we talk about the concept of fashion, it's really the foundation of the clothing that we wear today. And so we're here today. It is Fashion Revolution Week and the perfect time for us to explore the topic of transparency in fashion. Not to be mistaken with the latest trends in transparent fabrics. This is much more permanent and pervasive than that. It's about the impact of the clothes that we wear. And to get us warmed up today, I'd like to encourage you to jump into the chat and perhaps share where you're joining from and the countries you're joining us from. And if you feel inspired, perhaps you can reflect and share some of the fashion that you're wearing today. But essentially, from materials and production to what happens to our clothes after they've left our closets, our B Corp panelists today will share various diverse perspectives on what really goes on in the fashion industry and how they're making changes to tackle some of the biggest problems that we have in our social environmental landscape. Many of you may know that transparency is a cornerstone of the B Corp certification and movement, and B Corps are demonstrating that they can balance both profit and purpose-driven, positive impact-driven business. And this event is one moment where we can come together and share reflections and insights and inspire others to take action to be part of the solution as we move towards an inclusive, equitable and regenerative economy. I'm very excited to introduce our illustrious panel today. We are welcoming, let's see if that's, there we go, sorry. We're welcoming Emma Wallace, who is the Managing Director of the incredible Aotearoan designer clothing, which I'm representing today, Kowtow. And Michael Elias, the co-founder and CEO of Australasia's leading textile recovery and recycling company, UPPAREL. Eric Fu, co-founder of the innovative company that's re-engineering fashion to save our planet, Citizen Wolf. And finally, our special guest host today, who will be guiding the discussion, experienced and revered fashion journalist and features and fashion news director at Harper's BAZAAR Australia, Patty Huntington. And Patty recently wrote a great article in the April edition of Harper's BAZAAR on the rise of the B Corp movements and the certification within the fashion industry. So this conversation is continuing where that left off. So Patty will guide the discussion today. You're all very encouraged to share comments, reflections and questions in the chat, and we will have some time towards the end to hopefully answer those. We have an hour together. I'm sure the time will fly. And I will now defer to Patty to get us started.
Thank you very much, Angie, and welcome everyone, and welcome the other panelists. Look, it's obviously a very important, a pivotal year, week in the fashion calendar. When we look at sort of the terrible, the terrible events of the Rana Plaza tragedy. And look, this is a global campaign. It's driving a shake-up of the sector, uniting people with a shared view that while we love fashion, we don't want it to exploit people or the planet. So let's dive into this. Let's start with you, Emma. How does this manifesto align with your business purpose?
Well, amazingly, actually. I hate to just sort of go off the bat, but I was looking back at some of these sort of 4 key points from the manifesto that I thought were really cover the sort of purpose behind Kowtow as well. And I actually had to take screenshots because I didn't want to get any of the words wrong. So fashion conserves and restores the environment. Fashion is repaired, reused, recycled, and upcycled. Fashion is transparent and accountable, and fashion celebrates life. And I just thought, how amazing. There is all these things, these quite earnest things we need to think about, but celebrating life it's a joy. Fashion can be a joy. It can be about delight. It can be about comfort. It can also be about activism. It can also be about protest. And I thought for Kowtow, that just resonates so strongly. We really wanted to stand behind Fashion Revolution this year, particularly because it is the 10-year anniversary of the Rana Plaza tragedy. And coincidentally, we are also today releasing our first ever impact report, which I thought was very good timing. So really talking to the impact of us as a fashion business on the globe and opening the doors on what we do. So our key purpose is about putting people and planet first, and we use clothing as a vehicle to be able to create a circular design solution. And I sort of think that the time is right for people to start understanding and caring about what this is, the volume of fashion, the volume of the impact. So negative, and it's exciting to be in a panel with Michael and Eric, who are also working on those solutions together, because it's definitely a collaborative thing, and it's also a very exciting, challenging, but really creative area. So these are all sort of words that when I talk about Kowtow, and Gosha, who's the founder of Kowtow, 16 years ago, that's why she started the company, was to do these things. And I just feel it's amazing how it's starting to sort of resonate after 10 years of Rana Plaza. I actually think something's finally starting to resonate with people around, we can do something to change all of this. So yeah, I guess that's how I feel about the manifesto. Pretty positive.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm sorry I didn't include in the story about the sort of fashion B Corps that Angie mentioned. And I didn't include any of you guys, but it is really interesting. And so the process of becoming B Corp, registered certified is quite extraordinary. And I think it was someone from Basic mentioned that they thought that that the luxury brands have helped, over the past 10 years, them, enacting, certain things and taking things more seriously has helped, yes, has helped move the conversation as well. Look, as certified B Corps, you're all committed to meeting high standards of environmental and social performance, transparency and accountability. Along with a growing number of brands seeking certification, you're showing the world it's possible to be both profitable and purpose-driven in fashion and apparel. Eric, why do you think it's important for fashion businesses to behave differently?
I think fundamentally, fashion just isn't sustainable in the current way that we do things. The whole business model, as we see it, just seems strange in that you need to overproduce things in order to hit minimum quantities with factories, knowing that 30% of clothing that's going to be made is never going to be sold and is going to go into a landfill. And often it's made under unethical conditions. And this is accepted as being normal in the industry. And to us, it just seemed absolutely insane, which is one of the reasons why Citizen Wolf was started, to change the way that the fashion industry does work so that we can eliminate from the get-go all this unconscionable waste. And yeah, fundamentally, we just feel that the world doesn't need more fashion brands. There's plenty of them. What we need is a completely different way of working. And that is what we are excited by being a B Corp, in working with other brands who also share that same belief.
And Michael, what are some of the biggest challenges the sector faces in your opinion? Michael, are you there?
Of course, had to unmute. Yep. Yeah, look, I think for us, really it's about brands, aligning their mission to ensure that they're doing good. And, we're seeing a lot of brands, when we started our journey, we were a brand producing products with no real understanding of, the impact that we were making, but we learned over time. As we learned over time and understood the impact that we were making, we decided to do something about it. We made a change for ourselves. And then as we started to see the benefits, both environmentally, socially, and commercially on that, it was, well, actually, we should support others in doing the right thing and being able to change and, make a positive impact. It's been a journey for us where we've gone from a direct to consumer model over the last, 3 years to, 80% of what we do today is B2B, supporting brands, retailers, corporates on their journey to sustainability. And I think, people are starting to see the benefits, obviously environmentally through, the impact, the emission reductions and things like that. But on another note, what we're seeing is, with some of our corporate partners, we're seeing that when they make a positive change, a positive sustainable change, that's actually engaging very highly with their employees, their staff, their team, and people are, driving greater commitment to the brand or to the retailer at that point. So there's a lot of benefits out of it. And I think, we didn't know what we didn't know, and, we're still learning. And as some of these brands are, and we're seeing a lot of people make, the right change and, make positive change.
Mm-hmm. And look, fashion by definition is, the popular or latest styles of clothing, hair, decoration, behavior, whatever. I mean, naturally keeping up with fashion can lead to overconsumption, which has obviously multiple knock-on effects, as you've mentioned. But Michael, do you think we need to shift our collective view of how fashion is defined and understood?
I think there's a lot of education required on consumption, materialism, capitalism, and, everything else that comes with fashion. But I think on the other side, what we've been banging on about is what happens at the end of life, and what we purchase today, what is the outcome for it tomorrow, and they're all little messages. Where did it come from? Who made it? When we talk about things like modern slavery and all those types of things, and then was it the right working conditions? Now that it's been produced, what's going to happen to it at end of life? What's going to happen to the overstock supply that Eric mentioned? Things like that. And what we're seeing is people beginning to really take accountability and responsibility for this. And again, I think I'd love to say that we are very far along the way, but I feel as though we're still at a point of raising awareness. And I can tell you as a father that looking at a packet of chips in 20 packets of chips in a big packet of chips, I kind of go, well, that's a lot of waste, right? So and that's consumables and whatever else. But so really over time, we're starting to learn more. We greater awareness, more educated, and we'll make different decisions. But it takes time.
Sure does. Sure. Eric, are you seeing more consumers interested in having less?
Yes, so we definitely are seeing more and more customers come in and say that they're looking to do a capsule wardrobe rather than trying to buy more things.
Right.
And I think we've got Mary Kondo to thank for that, and the popularity of her book in terms of just pushing that minimalism button.
Uh-huh.
But I think on the downside, the reality is that it's still nowhere near enough. We don't have enough people yet. And a lot of people have started that journey, which is great, but there's still a long way to go. But this is encouraging that things are moving in the right direction.
Emma, how do you balance sales targets with impact outcomes?
That's always a tricky one that comes up, because obviously we are a business that requires profit to continue doing what we're doing. But I guess from the start, when you've got a founding principle that really is about putting people and planet first, every decision we make needs to come under that criteria. So we agonize on decisions, we debate decisions, and I think that's what a responsible business needs to do now. And customers need to hold us accountable to that, and I think the sales, I guess, look after themselves. I mean, that sounds really simplistic, but if you're doing the right thing and you're saying the right thing, you're not trying to greenwash, you're not trying to put, words out there that have no sense. If you're sticking to the facts and you're doing good things, people will come to you, even messages like, our latest message is, you know, wear more and there's less waste. So it's about say just little messages like that tell people, actually, we're not trying to just shove another garment in your bag. We're just saying, look at what you've got and actually wear it more. And then when you think about your next purchase, do it with a mindfulness, you know. And I think people, I don't know, I think customers enjoy that sort of honesty.
Sure. Eric, what does the term transparency mean to you, and why is it important in your opinion?
So transparency for us means just being really, really honest, both with ourselves and with our customers and the community, and not trying to hide problems, but in fact, acknowledge them and admit that you can't be perfect at everything, but you're going to try and do better. And for us, it's important because it makes us not just better people, but it makes us fundamentally a better business. One example is that going through the B Corp process itself for the first time was very confronting, because we thought, of course we're brilliant, of course we're great, right? Everything we do is amazing.
And you had to get the data.
Exactly. But when you actually go through the process, you realize, oh my God, there's just so much we haven't thought about. There's so much more we can be doing. And for us, that was a very valuable part of that experience. But to take it further, we're about to be up for renewal. So we're going through that process now. And, we wrote a blog post where we actually showed all our results on the B Corp audit in full and said, here are the things we're not doing well, and here's the things that we're going to do better. And why? Because it does fundamentally, I feel, make us a better business.
Yeah. Can I ask how long it took you, the process?
So the first time, it took us quite a while. We didn't complete it because it was a bit too overwhelming. But then we managed to get a really good consultant on board to help us with that process. And it took us a good, I think, 9 months to get all our ducks in a row, and then another 6 months for the audit process itself. It was a bit skewed because we did it just as COVID hit. So it wasn't probably the most representative of times, but it was definitely a lengthy process, just making sure that everything was right on our side.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I described it, I think, as the Olympics of sustainability. And I think the metric was something like 90% of people who, obviously a lot of people just try it out and then they sort of abandon it before they go. Look, moving into solutions and the positive impact of B Corps. Michael, how has becoming a B Corp helped you measure and improve your impact and your transparency?
Yeah, look, I think, for us, ever since we did become a B Corp, which I feel Eric's somewhat challenges, it took us 14 months, end to end as well. But, I think today we are a certified B Corp where we're taking responsibility, where, as Emma said, we're being real, and being real is being honest and transparent. What that's meant for us is, ever since that, we've been in a position where we've demonstrated, at the highest level, which we believe that, we've been able to do a lot of things, and we've been able to do a lot of things right, both socially, environmentally, and commercially, and that's good business, and it's good for the planet. And, it's led to a couple of really interesting points. One being that, every partner that we have today, we have not contacted or reached out to, they've come to us. In addition to that, whenever any of those big corporates, those big brands have had to, go through an audit process or a review process, it's been quite interesting where, they've walked in with their audit people, with an intention to audit for one day, and we've just laughed and said, well, we went through a 14-month audit, let's get this done, right? So it's really given, it's confidence to the market that we're doing the right thing, and we're really proud of that. And transparency and traceability is everything in every part of what we do in terms of reporting every outcome and everything. So
okay. And Emma, look, talking about the supply chain and paying a living wage to workers, how do you tackle this, and what do you think needs to happen across the industry to improve? This is one of the biggest issues, isn't it? The living wage.
Yeah.
Wasn't it Baptist World Aid last year? It was 10% of the industry is paying a living wage. The year before it was 5%. It's still a massive problem.
It's a huge global problem. Our supply chain is based in India. Within India, there's multiple states, and they're all trying to figure out how to measure this living wage. So part of it's that. I guess with us being Fair Trade certified on top of B Corp, we've been talking about wages for a long time. So from farm level through the whole supply chain. But I think what's you know, the living wage is one thing, which is really important, but also I think in the fashion industry, there's the relationship with your supply chain is really important. So, you know, you've heard horror stories of in COVID where brands just turned around and just cancelled all of their orders. And so, you know, what do those factories do? They still need to have money coming in the bank. So, I mean, I think it's part of that is also looking at the holistic relationship you have with your supply chain and doing things like, you know, ensuring you don't cancel orders, ensuring you have long-term relationships that you maintain and you don't just pick up and drop because you've found a 10-cent cheaper t-shirt that you can support. And I think also just being, you know, reliable and responsible. We, through fair trade, which I think is something interesting for maybe B Corp to think about as we move forward, you know, we make payments through a year. It's not about a big lump sum payment. It's about how does another business work? How can we work together to both grow and both continue to be sustainable? So I think living wage is something that is ongoing. And like Michael said, you know, it's about sharing your journey. You can't just be there at the end and it's all perfect. It's actually about going, we're finding this a real challenge, you know, but it doesn't mean the intent isn't there to get there at the end. In New Zealand, we are living wage accredited, which we feel really great about, but yeah, the supply chain's the next one.
Right. Eric, with the goal of you know, hoping to revamp the fashion industry, in particular manufacturing of fashion, what are some of the innovations you've put in place to drive positive change?
So there's a few things, but the core of our business is to eliminate the overproduction problem. So we started with a blank sheet of paper and thought, what's the best way or the best impact we can make for the industry? And that would be to not contribute to the current problems of just oversupply. So we've developed an algorithm that works out your body shape just based on your height, weight, age, and women of bra size. And then we manufacture everything on demand using some special technology that we've developed. And that way we can eliminate all the waste inherent in the traditional fashion model. It means customers get exactly what they want. And when they reorder, they'll be guaranteed to fit exactly the way they like it as well. And anything that we buy in terms of fabric, if it doesn't sell in one style, we can actually create in a different style, in a V-neck or a crew neck or a polo, depending on what customers actually want. So that way we've eliminated a lot of inventory and supply waste from the production processes itself as well. We're also 100% circular, so that we only use natural fibers and we upcycle everything or turn it into new yarn, into our recycled yarn that can be then made into new t-shirts. So yeah, so nothing goes to landfill.
Right, great. Emma, you've successfully developed a sought-after designer brand with a loyal following. How much has transparency around the impact of Kowtow contributed to this, do you think?
I think hugely with our customers. It is incredibly meaningful for them to see the transparency we have. I mentioned that impact report. So we actually have just published that today with our complete supply chain, all our sourcing. You can just go and find where we get our trims from, because we actually believe that, you know, we've done all the hard work and then we want the rest of the industry to join us with working towards being a circular designed label. So yeah, I think really, really important to have that.
And look, Michael, you've built your business on tackling specifically the problem of textile waste. Firstly, how are you changing the way the sector and some of the biggest players in it manage waste, and how do you report on the impact?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question, and I think, you know, we're seeing changes more and more over time. So, to give you an example, when we launched our consumer model, we made that readily available for free, and opened it up to retailers and brands across the country so that they could engage with their customers to ensure we divert items from landfill. What happened off the back of that was these brands and retailers said, what about our dormant, faulty, end of season customer returns? There's a number of reasons why stock can no longer be sold. And so can you support us with that? So what we did was we began reporting every single kilogram that came through the door and every outcome of that kilogram, where it went and what happened to it. And so we created a complete chain of custody on what was going on with any piece of item. We were then able to report back. You know, so this became our, you know, impact statements that we've started providing to our partners. Sure, ever seen some of them. You know, but off the back of that, you know, it became about outcome reports. So outcome reports were all about where are, you know, what was the outcome of everything? We were able to recycle X amount. This was the kilograms of textiles to cardboard to plastic to the labels to the buttons to the zips. What was, you know, what actually happened to each and every piece? And we're talking, you know, potentially across, you know, 4 containers worth of items. So it's quite detailed reporting. And off the back of that, the next part was, how do we make recommendations to these brands to make improvements in the future? And so that, you know, a simple example is, you know, we all want to do the right thing. And, you know, cotton tote bags, for example, are a great product. But off the back of a cotton tote bag, if we use a recycled PET label in there, which is great because it's recycled PET, what that means is there's then a challenge because we can't recycle them all together. You know, and so sharing feedback like that, you know, having certain hardware on items as a fashion statement, whilst it's great, means that you might lose 4% of recyclability. So being able to share that back to brands, back to retailers has been great. And I think, you know, going all the way back, our service is a paid for service. It's a commercial model. We pay people well and truly beyond, you know, minimum wage. And as a result of that, what it means is this cost is passed on to a brand, onto a retailer. Over time, what we're going to see is, you know, as Eric's example, retailer overbuys 30%. The cost to discard and ensure that the 30% doesn't end up in landfill starts to come off their P&Ls, right? And that's all of a sudden, when it starts to hurt commercially, people take notice. And so it's managing that and balancing that.
Interesting. Look, even our most beloved and well-made clothing does wear out eventually. Emma, who do you think should be responsible for managing the so-called end of life of a garment?
Well, I mean, we believe we should. We take a long time considering the materials that go into every piece of clothing. We make a choice that it is organic cotton, that it's natural, that we are removing all plastic from our garments. So to Michael's point, is it's getting that singular fibre, so that can you know, help with those circular solutions and keeping garments in the loop. I think that customers do have a part to play in this through the care of their garments to extend the life. So we do encourage people to, you know, we advise them and educate them and help them understand what it takes to care for garments. We offer a repair program, so if you lose a button or some stitches, you can bring it back to us and we repair it for free. And then we offer a take back program at the end of it. You know, we work with Michael and UPPAREL with some of those solutions at the end of life. Obviously, for us, the main thing is to keep it in circulation as long as possible. Honestly, a garment needs to be virtually sort of like, you know, threadbare for us to be going, okay, this is the end. And we need to come up with solutions around what we do then. It's a tricky thing because in the industry, it's still such early days around those solutions. And I think there's so much, you know, R&D that needs to go into it. Michael's is one solution, but, you know, there needs to be more because of the volume that is out there. Yeah.
Do you think the government's really on board?
Not so much in New Zealand, a little bit. There is a bit of product stewardship work going on, not specific to the fashion industry. I think in Australia, there's a bit more proactiveness around it. I've seen some amazing work from the Australian Fashion Council. So, yeah, hopefully.
Right. Michael, what's needed if we're going to transition to a model of product stewardship?
Oh, look, I think, you know, just you know, adding to Emma's comment, some brands are taking responsibility, and if the brands aren't taking the responsibility, you know, it's sharing or communicating that back to the customer, right? So where you've got a lower price point product, you know, I think customers need to understand that potentially the fibers in that struggle to be recycled. Therefore, it may not be able to be recycled, or it may, you know, take longer, or, you know, consume more energy to be recycled. I think it's a bit of both. You know, sharing knowledge over time, you know, and we'll make change. You know, we're seeing that the largest fashion, you know, brands and retailers really stepping it up. You know, and everyone who's, you know, anyone who's trying to make a positive impact, which is almost you know, it's a non-negotiable today. It's you know, you have to do better. Like, you know, we can all, you know, we can be living a great life in 10 years, but our kids won't be. So, you know, we have to do better. And I think people are recognizing that. And you're seeing that from within organizations and elsewhere. So, yeah, look, I think brands, you know, taking responsibility and consumers understanding what needs to happen.
Okay, but looking to the future and taking action, and just sort of looking at what's next. Eric, how do we get more fashion businesses to be more transparent about the impact they're having on the world, do you think?
I think there's going to be both push and pull factors. On the push side, having more customers actually care about this and advocating it. And that's, I think, what Fashion Revolution is very much about. Certainly helps. Along with that, I think there's still a lot that governments can do. We're already hearing from the EU, for example, that they're going to be implementing stronger laws around greenwashing and the like, and those sorts of things, I think, help. On the pull side, though, I think that's probably going to be more of interest for businesses, because a lot of us are very self-interested in terms of we have to survive and pay staff and so forth. And to Michael's point, right, the self-interest comes in by being transparent and actually looking at the things that you don't do well and fixing them, by actually acknowledging problems and getting solutions to them, is fundamentally going to be better for the bottom line. And that self-interest needs, I think, to be made more apparent. And that's what part of being the B Corp community is about.
And Emma, what do you think is the next, I mean, I hate to use the word trend, but the next big trend in fashion and sustainability?
Yeah, I think, I mean, resale is just exploding. So I think that's going to keep on exploding, which is a really interesting part. So many businesses are now bringing in their own resale onto their own platforms, something we are looking at. And I think that is going to keep on going. I think there's also an idea of the movement towards individuality and almost like a no trend. So kind of moving into spaces that work with what you need, your requirements, and a desire to perhaps have garments that have longevity. So that longevity thing, I think you talked about the luxury part of the market, has always been, the DNA of that, but I wonder if it's going to, move into more mainstream. So that would be really interesting. So no trend could be a trend.
Yeah. Well, I think we actually sort of get it moving through these quite quickly, but I'm going to throw in another question here, and that is, can I just ask each of you, what was your biggest takeaway when you actually went through the exhaustive B Corp? What was the biggest thing? Because I remember the Basic girls were saying, I mean, they knew that they obviously made locally, but they didn't realize how much of it was within their own kind of local community. They were kind of blown away by that. Can I just go to each of you and ask you, what were the biggest takeaways, your biggest learnings from going through the process?
Can I dive in?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess quite a lot of the things that B Corp talked about were things that we talked about in our business already, but it gave us the confidence to talk more openly about it, I think, and gave us a framework to talk around it, which I thought was really, really helpful, and also to understand the impact not only on our supply chain, but our operations in New Zealand and how we bring the two together. I think it was super powerful with that, and also feeling like you're part of this movement with these other businesses. So sometimes you can feel a bit like you're a lone wolf, and knowing that there's this movement of businesses who really do believe that putting people and planet first is a way forward and they want to change the system, that felt like, that talked to our little activist edge that we have at Kowtow here, and I thought that was really cool to be involved with.
And look, they were also saying, Basic were also saying that, there was a lot of camaraderie between brands in Australia who were going through, and an exchange of information. So did that happen in New Zealand too with the brands? Is there like a sharing of information?
Yeah, there is. I mean, we have, I guess in New Zealand, the fashion industry is quite small, and of that percentage, the B Corps are pretty small. But I'd say with the B Corp community, there are ideas around sustainability that aren't just relative to fashion. So, having those conversations and talking at that level, it was suddenly not dorky and nerdy. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're all on the same page and we're all going to try and work together. So we've built some really awesome collaborations across other businesses in New Zealand.
Okay. And Michael, what about you? What were the biggest learnings? I mean, what were your biggest takeaways from undergoing the exhaustive B Corp certification process?
The exhaustive B Corp application highlighted that you had to be very real and do a lot to achieve certification, which is very important, and meant that no one could just get on there and claim to be doing the right thing. I think what we took away was two things. One is that as we were applying, we recognized that whilst we were doing amazing things, we weren't actually tracking and monitoring it, and so that set the scene for everything after that, which was every single kilogram, we need to know where it's going, where it's coming from, what's happening, and that, you know, that's part of our complete traceability. So that was really important, to be tracking every single thing that we do along the way, regardless of, you know, not just items in, but anything that we introduce, any partnership that we promote, you know, what is the impact of that? I think the that's one side of the other one was, you know, and this is, you know, humbling, but, you know, our score wasn't as high as what we thought it would have been.
Right.
And, you know, I think that's a problem, you know, just, you know, people would be disappointed in that. I think for us, that just meant, shit, we got a lot more to do here to, you know, be better. And that was, you know, that's a good thing.
Right.
You know, so we've worked on a lot of things over the last 2.5 years, and getting ready now to, as is Eric, to start the reassessment process and, you know, recertification. So yeah, that's the two key things.
And Eric, how about you? What were your biggest kind of takeaways or learnings, I guess?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The first is just how much we didn't know. I mean, we started the B Corp process probably about 2-3 years after founding.
Oh, right.
And we've been around for about 7 years now. And it, as I said, the first time it was a bit of an abortive attempt because it was a bit too daunting. But I think that was when we first realized, you know, as great as we thought we were, it was quite clear that we had massive knowledge gaps, which in hindsight, the B Corp process actually provides a blueprint for, here are the things that you need to actually look at, right, to be good. So that was very, very instructive, and, you know, it was an eye-opening experience for us, which I think was very positive. The second part is it's, oh, sorry, what's the tip of my tongue? The second part, I think, is around just how we can actually benchmark against the best in the world, right? Again, it's one of those things where we think we know we're doing great, but when you actually go through the audit, it's like, well, how do you prove that, right? What have you actually done? What have you actually put forward in terms of certifications? What positive steps have you done besides just saying, yeah, you know, we pay people fairly, right? Or we make sure that we get good suppliers. And that discipline, I thought, was very, very important to build into our business as we were growing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Look, just wrapping up, a final question for everyone, going back down the line, starting with Emma. I mean, in just a few words, what is your call to action or final message for our audience today? Starting with you, Emma.
Wow. Okay. I guess we're a brand, we don't like to preach, but I would say that wherever you are in your business, I guess, just take a moment to think about some of those decisions you're making. Everything you do has an impact, and it can be positive, it can be negative, and I think it's sort of our duty for the planet that we make, you know, these good choices. I guess, you know, I have children, I have adult children, and, you know, they talk about the world as being a place that they almost don't feel is going to be habitable for them, and it just breaks my heart, you know, and it drives you every day to be, you know, stopping and just really considering your choices. There are options out there, and there are more and more businesses, particularly in something like B Corp. Like, you don't have to be a B Corp to reach out to B Corp and get some support and guidance about even just starting this journey. And yeah, ask questions. And I just think it's the little things. I know people say that's a joke, but it is actually every little decision you make that's going to impact into creating more good out there.
Okay. And Michael, how about you?
Look, it's really interesting. I was sitting in a panel last week, and I was sitting with someone from Oz Harvest, and their suggestion for everyone was go dumpster diving. And so that's now stuck in my head when people ask, what's the one thing? But no, don't go dumpster diving unless you want to. No, look, for us, I think, you know, the one piece of feedback is consider where, you know, as you're making any purchase, consider what's going to happen at end of life. And I mean, that's with anything, whether it be a fashion item or any other item, furniture, it's anything, you know, what's going to happen at end of life? Is it going to last long enough? Is it going to last a test of time? And what am I going to do at the end of life? Because that has to be your responsibility as well. We can't just buy things and discard of them because it has to go somewhere.
Absolutely. And Eric, what about you?
I would say whatever it is that you think you can do to make a positive impact, just start. It doesn't need to be big. It can be small. But all of us are on a journey. None of us were perfect from the get-go. And for us, the last 5 years, we've learned so much about what we can be doing better just because we started with something simple. And as we've learned and done things, we found other things that we didn't know and therefore learn from and can improve on. So I think, we can't change the world overnight, but we all have to start somewhere. So if it's something small, just start it.
Every journey starts with a single step, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. I think we're going to now throw to Angie. She's going to, we've got quite a few questions coming in. Are you going to facilitate that, Angie? Is that right?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Patty. And thanks to all of our panelists for your reflections and insights today. That was really great. We do have some questions, so I will share those with you all. We're going to start with one that we've got from Tony, who's directed a question to Michael, and he'd like to know more about your bring back policy that are donated to charity partners, particularly around tracking the impact. Does most of it come back? ?
Yeah, so what we offer, and just to kind of give some context to this, is all items that come into our facilities, if they are fit for wear and we are allowed to reuse them, as you can appreciate, some things cannot be reused for reasons, but if they can be reused, they are provided to charities, social enterprise, not-for-profit across Australia and New Zealand. Today, I think we support officially over 435 organisations. We donate the items to them that are fit for wear, and because they are pre-sorted, they are sorted to what they need and what they want. We have an expectation, and it's an agreement, don't want to use the other word, with our charity partners and not-for-profits, that anything that they don't want or don't need must come back to apparel, because we have another 434 that potentially want it, and nothing is allowed to go offshore or into landfill. Quite, to commit to that, and for us to be real with that, we highlight that these items may have trackers in them at any point in time, just as our partners have the same expectation of us. And so we just share that back to them. Do we see things come back? Absolutely. It's really interesting to see what comes back, and the reasons as to why. Could be missed in the sorting process. But from that, it's not certain organizations, like Save the Children, you can recycle with them online. So when we send them things, they actually promote and say, bring it back into apparel when you're done with it. It's not with everyone. We'll get there slowly.
Amazing.
Oh, can't hear you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, on mute. I should know better. Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I'm sure you'll get there eventually. So I've got a question from Amy, and I might direct this one to Emma. Do you think more brands should start utilising Deadstock Fabrics?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do. It's something that we do as well, and I think it's really an exciting creative challenge to reimagine, these sorts of fabrics into different things. I mean, that's a really important part of, circular solutions, is to ensure that these materials don't go into landfill or go into something that's not as good. So keeping them going and redesigning them into different garments, it's a really, really cool thing. Because of the supply chain we have, and because we source our fabrics from the seed. So, all of our fabrics are our fabrics. So I know Deadstock is something that the broader industry also has. And I'm not sure where you can kind of tap into Deadstock Fabrics for people, generally speaking, if she's wanting some help with that. But I think I'm sure there's some businesses that still do that. They did in my student days. So I'm sure it still happens that you can tap into Deadstock fabric from other brands and then reuse it. There's nothing wrong with it. In fashion, it's often just the season before print. I mean, seriously. So it's like, it's totally fine. And I think it actually is just a good way of going. We've used all those resources to create this material. Let's keep it going and give it more life.
That feeds in really nicely to your no trend prediction. Okay, so next question. This is one from Aisha, who would like to know, for a startup label, would you recommend trying to get B Corp certified right at the beginning of your journey? I might pass this one to Eric.
Sure. It's going to really depend on at what stage you are in your startup and how much how much of the other parts of the business you've got sorted. I would say though that the earlier that you get started, the better, only because it is a great platform for understanding what sort of things you need to put in place for your business. And it isn't so much about having a policeman say, no, naughty, you're doing the wrong thing, do this. I think it's very much the approach of, here's what the best businesses in the world do that are sustainable and are doing the right thing for people and planet. This is what you can learn. So I would at least recommend starting the process if you don't necessarily go through the full audit process.
Absolutely. The impact assessment tool is freely available to anyone to use and explore. And we encourage as many people as possible to do that. I've got a question here, which I'm actually going to open up to Patty as well. It's a broader question. It's from an anonymous attendee. With the cost of living crisis impacting consumers and wanting to make the shift to more mindful, sustainable purchases, but who are struggling with the increased in costs that can come from shifting away from fast fashion, how can companies help make those decisions easier to follow through on?
You want to start with me, or?
Yeah, well, I'm open to anyone's input. Do any of our B Corp panelists want to jump in on that one?
I mean, it's a good question because, if consumers were prepared to pay more, at the end of the day, there's a certain customer that wants to go and buy a cheap T-shirt, or they don't have the budget for something more expensive. So it's a really good question. I don't have a brand myself in terms of making clothes, so I don't know how the brands look at that in terms. You've obviously got to put a certain price point on it for it, you to be able to continue on in business. You can't just give them away. But yeah, interested to hear what other people say.
I can, I guess, have an attempt at answering this question. I think the big challenge for us as fashion brands, and I guess any other brand that tries to sell things, is there's a conflation in the audience's mind between price and value. And the two, while linked, are not necessarily the same thing. Fast fashion is cheap, but I would argue that it's not good value because it doesn't last. It doesn't necessarily look great. It's not going to particularly survive the first wash, where it might shrink significantly because the materials were bad in the first place, besides the fact that the way it was made was exploited. So it's cheap, but not good value. And what we're finding that more and more of our customers are coming back and saying is that they're willing to pay more for quality because it lasts. And if you look at it from a cost per wear perspective, it actually ends up being better than buying something disposable that you then throw out after 2, 3, 5 washes. It's the same way that it's better, right, to have, cutlery than to just buy disposable knives and forks that you keep throwing out after each use.
Yeah, absolutely. So less and longer term thinking. Okay, we have a similar question from Olivia around making sustainable clothing more accessible for people on lower income brackets. So I think that we may have addressed that one, but Emma, did you have anything to add to that conversation?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. The accessibility, is always something we talk about. It's like, how can we make our product more accessible? Because, there are prices that come with, using a fair trade supply chain. There are prices that come with using a lot of materials that perhaps aren't industry standard, but are actually ultimately able to fit into a circular, solution. So, I guess there are ways of doing it through resell. I think resell is a really amazing opportunity for people to sort of get a better get maybe a higher quality product for a cheaper price. And then also thinking about how can we repair it, because some people, when something, you know, gets damaged, they think that's the end of it, but there are opportunities to repair it, and it can have a really long life. So I think, you know, you do have to be a bit savvy, but looking into that sort of the second-hand market can be a really good way of still finding garments of longevity that at a, you know, maybe at a better price point.
Can I just jump in, because we hear this a lot, because, you know, we have a fee for service, and as you know, Citizen Wharf and Kowtow, the products are at a different price point to fast fashion items or, you know, mass retailers. Sustainability comes at a cost, right? To farm things, to grow things, to you know, pay the right wage, to utilize less water, to utilize the right machinery, the right equipment, to ensure, you know, reduced emissions on the way to distribution channels and things like that. All of that costs money, and so, you know, we've just become used to, as a society, of being able to buy whatever the hell we want to whenever we want to, and there's so much of it and it's so cheap that the mindset change there needs to come from the consumer, that sustainability comes at a cost. Yes, that t-shirt that is $2 today is, you know, was created for $2, right? This t-shirt that is $100 was created, you know, to get to $100, because it's not like you're making much greater margin. You know, the margin percentages are probably the same, but it's the work involved in getting it there and you know, ensuring it's a good quality product. We're just so used to going and being able to buy fast fashion. Then the next question is, do we actually need it, and do we want it? You know, so it's a change in our consumer behavior. You know, I'm sure everyone on here would love to do things cheaper and sell more stuff, but cheaper comes at Eric's point, less of a quality.
Great, thanks, Michael. I've got a practical question here from Erin. In what resources are available to reference global best practice in fashion? I will add in there that obviously the BIA and the B certification pathway does provide access to resources and best practices. But do you have any other practical tips for our attendees today?
I could probably leap in just around things like certifications. I know there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years in fashion around certifications, and some not being quite as great as other ones. And I think that's going to be a conversation that's going to continue for ever and ever. But looking at those as a best practice can, you know, be really helpful when you're making decisions to see whether a company is using GOTS approved processes and dyes. So if they're, you know, using organic cotton, there are quite a few of those. I don't think there's actually like a master library for this sort of stuff to help guide people. There's a lot of organizations out there, and it is a bit of a minefield, but I think there's some really key certifications that you can look at, and that might help guide you with some of those choices. It's not so much about, well, it's partly about business practice, but it's also about the environmental impacts that your garments are having, which is a really important part of making those decisions.
Absolutely. And related to that, another question from Anur is around, how do you identify opportunities to create positive change in the industry? So this is probably linking back to your mission and purpose and your stakeholder governance sort of statements and commitments. So I guess I might push that forward to another framing of the question is, how do you identify the next big impact or priority for your organisations in the context of transparency and accountability in fashion? Do you want to have a go at answering that one, Eric?
Yeah, look, I think all good businesses start with a very personal problem. It's because someone has decided that this seems stupid, that why hasn't anyone solved this problem? And then you get to the realization of, you know what, I should try and solve this problem. So I think where you should start is actually looking at what really frustrates you about the fashion business. For us, it was just getting things that fit and the amount of waste that the industry produces. And that's fundamentally what we build the business around. For someone else, it might be around the use of sustainable fabrics, or it might be around, there isn't, another part of us was, why is it that the only thing I can get tailored is a suit and not the stuff I actually wear all the time? where I get a lot more value. So I would start at a personal level first, because that's what you're going to really end up being passionate about and really want to try and solve.
Great, thank you. So that was our final question from the audience. If anyone wants to add anything further, you're very welcome. Patty, thank you so much for being our special guest host today, and to all of our panelists, Emma, Michael and Eric, we really appreciate your insights and contribution and your candor. So thank you so much to you all, and thanks to everyone who has joined us today. We're going to gift you with a few minutes of time to end the hour.